Tour, performing at the St. Augustine Amphitheater on Sunday, May 18th, 2025 at 8 p.m., blending classical and pop rock with his original cello arrangements. More information at Ticketmaster.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and on today's First Coast Connect, is it possible this election season to ditch labels and partisan identities? We're asking a group of local college students trying to do exactly that. Later, 25 chronically unhoused people are getting a place to live. We talk with the organizers of the effort to solve homelessness with homes. And creatures of the night descend on Bay Street for a haunted pub crawl. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. Email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or tag us on social. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. The presidential candidates are ratcheting up their criticism of each other with fewer than 2 weeks left before the election. Vice President Harris says she agrees former President Donald Trump is a fascist. That's a view expressed by one of Trump's former chiefs of staff. Harris explained why last night in a town hall meeting near Philadelphia.
The reason why among them is a legitimate fear based on Donald Trump's words and actions that he will not obey an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
She spoke on CNN. Harris will campaign later today in Georgia with former President Barack Obama. She'll also be joined by entertainers Tyler Perry, Samuel L. Jackson, and Bruce Springsteen. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump heads to Arizona and Nevada to campaign today. In Nevada, he'll hold a rally intended to build support among Asian American and Pacific Island voters. Of all eligible voters in the state, AAPI voters make up nearly a tenth of Nevada's population. They're also one of the fastest growing voting groups in the country. NPR's Windsor Johnston reports they could play a key role in this year's close presidential election.
Christine Chen is the executive director of APIA Vote, a nonpartisan voter education group for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. She says Asian American voters are starting to turn out at the polls in record numbers, especially in swing states.
From what we've seen in the last decade with this growth, with the 2020 census, we saw that every single state except for Hawaii grew in double digits.
Chen says with Asian Americans becoming one of the fastest growing voter groups, neither party can afford to take their support for granted. According to recent data from AAPI, Kamala Harris was viewed more favorably by Asian American voters than Donald Trump. Windsor Johnston, NPR News.
Unionized machinists at aircraft maker Boeing have voted to reject the latest contract offer from the company. From member station KUOW in Seattle, Casey Martin prepared this report.
The contract deal from Boeing was rejected by 64% of the machinists union. That's tens of thousands of people in 3 states. After over a month on strike, most machinists say they're holding out for Boeing to reinstate some version of a previous pension plan lost in a previous contract negotiation. Jack Pleasant has been with the company for 15 years.
This has been a long time coming for me. Yeah, I think it's time to take a little strong position. Yeah.
Boeing did offer higher matches to 401k plans and a general wage increase, but it wasn't enough. The union president said Wednesday that no new talks with the company had been scheduled. For NPR News, I'm Casey Martin in Seattle.
On Wall Street, in pre-market trading, Dow futures are lower. This is NPR.
And you're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. The three white men serving life sentences for chasing and killing Ahmaud Arbery in Brunswick, Georgia, are asking a judge for a new trial. A hearing is set for today. A jury convicted Greg and Travis McMichael and their neighbor William Roddy Bryan of murdering the 25-year-old black man back in 2020. The men chased Arbery in their trucks, and Bryan recorded Travis McMichael shooting him at close range with a shotgun. Attorneys are making a range of arguments for a new trial, from a tainted jury to ineffective counsel for one of the men. The judge has set aside 2 days to hear their legal motions. Florida state officials have rolled out a new fraud prevention program to help protect people impacted by Hurricane Milton. The Check My Contract portal is a free service that helps property owners understand the fine print in their home repair contracts to ensure that they are in compliance with Florida law. 16 people were convicted in fraud investigations following Hurricane Ian back in 2022. This afternoon in Jacksonville, we're going to have sunny skies with highs in the mid-80s, mostly clear overnight with lows in the low 60s. Patchy fog developing again tomorrow morning. Sunny in the afternoon with highs in the low to mid-80s. Winds increasing through the day. It'll be mostly clear for your Friday night plans with lows in the low 60s. And looking ahead to the weekend, patchy fog on Saturday morning, but both days will have sunny skies with highs in the low to mid-80s.
Other contributors include Sony Pictures, presenting the new movie Here, reuniting the director, writer, and stars of Forrest Gump, a tale of love, loss, laughter, and life. Here is only in theaters on Friday, November 1st.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, at a time when so much political dialogue is reduced to reactionary comments and angry tweets, a local student group aims to elevate the space for conscientious conversation. We ask the creators of the St. Augustine-based collective what they think they can accomplish. Later in the program, can homes solve chronic homelessness? The city undertakes a pilot program with space for 25 individuals. But first, talking politics is increasingly anathema in public spaces, the workplace, sporting events, even family gatherings. But a group of local college students is determined to have these conversations in constructive ways, and here to tell us about it is Hannah Gerber, president of the Political Forum at Flagler College. Good morning. How are you doing, Hannah?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm very good. Manny Marcantoni, the vice president of the group. Good morning, Manny.
Good morning.
And the forum's head of public outreach, Gabe James. Good morning, Gabriel.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a delight to have you all. So, Gabe, there's an image on your Instagram that kind of characterizes your group, and it sort of cracks me up. It's like a screaming eagle with a slice of pizza flying into its beak. Obviously, you're trying to appeal to kids who are interested in politics. All kids are kind of interested in pizza. Tell us a little bit about how this group was formed.
Yeah, so we as college students, we kind of came together in our political science classrooms where we talked a lot about the state of the nation, the news with our professors. They really encourage productive dialogue among the students, certainly. We came together to try and create something. We have the Democrats, the Flagler Democrats, we have the Flagler Republicans, but we recently saw the dissolving of the actual nonpartisan club a couple years ago at Flagler, so we really felt like we had to kind of restart that. And I ran into Hannah and Manny because I wanted to start something like that myself, but then I heard they had already made it before they beat me to it. So I kind of approached them. I said, hey, is there anything I can do to help you guys? I'd really be interested in trying to help make a change at the campus, create a really impactful student organization with you guys that promotes coming away from this radical sort of set of ideologies that we see on campuses, the divisiveness, the polarization and make something where everyone can come together.
Yeah. Hannah, where were you in your mind when you decided that this was a group that you wanted to form? Was this you and Manny together just sort of brainstorming?
Yeah, so we had a professor who did the first 20 minutes of class talking about kind of what's going on in the news and letting it open to the students. We loved that since freshman year and decided it's needed on college campuses. So
What did you like about having that conversation?
I think it opened it up in a very non-harsh way. Kind of opened the conversation to the students that say whatever you want. If there's something that you're confused about in the news, let's talk about it. Let's clarify things for you. And we just, we loved it. It
Yeah.
was our favorite part of class. So.
Yeah. Was it stuff that you were aware of, Manny, when you were having these discussions? Were you already like a news consumer, or were you sort of hearing about these issues in class and then just becoming interested?
I would say it was a mix of both. Going into my freshman year, I definitely wasn't reading the news all of the time, but because we were having these conversations in class, it really pushed, honestly, everybody to kind of go and look at the news before class started so that we had something interesting to talk about.
There's no shortage of, political news, obviously, national and international. How did the October 7th incident, the attack of Hamas on Israel, that was a very animating discussion on a lot of campuses. How significant was that for you on your campus, Manny?
I would say in the beginning, we talked a lot about it in our classes, especially because we're political science majors. At the time, I wasn't in any sort of like international classes, but it still came up in discussion, especially in classes where we were talking about the news. A lot of people with different feelings, and especially with it being so new, some people just discovering their opinions on it for the first time, changing their opinions. Definitely buzz on campus, though.
Yeah. And Gabe, was it similar? I mean, Flagler's a private school. We don't maybe see the coverage of what's happening there in terms of protests in the same way that we did at public schools. And, where there were crackdowns, for instance, by the administration. What was the mood in terms of, on campus? Were there protests? Were there any clashes?
There were no real big protests like we saw at some of the bigger colleges that were in the news. Flagler would shut that down real quick. As being a private school, they really try to stick with that nonpartisanship at the college. So protests don't survive long. Protesters usually get kicked off of campus pretty quickly. Though there was a lot of discussion about it in class and a lot of ferocity among students. I've noticed even just recently I've witnessed a couple students like yelling at each other in classrooms about whether they support the Palestinian cause and the what happened to Israel on October 7th. So there's definitely some volatility among students.
Yeah. And you are all juniors at Flagler, and so I don't know if I remember exactly how these events coincided, Hannah, but in terms of protests adjacent to the school, I know that there was a lot of protesting around the removal of the Confederate monument in the center of the downtown area there. And, Proud Boys came to town. It got very, very tense. Was that something that you were aware of when it was happening? Was it something that any of you were involved in?
I think we just missed it when we entered. I know I actually didn't learn about it until my sophomore year from a professor talking about it, which made me kind of dive into what actually went down. I think from talking to other students who were older than me, talked about how just mind-blowing it was that we had it in our city, and then kind of led to the start of a lot of different changes of people wanting to get more involved in not necessarily the college protesting, but the city protests. That kind of led to the start of that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Manny, when you have meetings with a group, I mean, how are they structured? Who's invited? And how do you kind of pitch it to other students who might be interested?
So we're sending emails to all of the law minors, all of the political science majors, and every single one of our professors that we have, and any professors that maybe aren't in our department that we know personally or that we don't know but think might be interested in sharing with their students in their classes. We are also posting on social media about those things. And then I know we're trying to figure out a way to send campus-wide emails. It's a little bit difficult, but that's definitely something we want to do. We have had our first event was a debate watch party. We did have a great turnout.
Which debate?
The presidential debate.
Okay.
And it was great. It was very successful.
So this would have been the debate between Kamala Harris as opposed to Joe Biden and Donald Trump?
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. And so what has the reaction been when you talk about this, Club Gabe? Like, are people interested? Or do you think that there's an appetite for, increased political dialogue? Or do you find people are sort of like, enough, I don't want any more political conversation?
Well, that's a great point, Anne. And what I would say to that is that there are certain students who are much more interested in being part of an affiliation, while there's a lot of students who are much more interested in talking about ideas. There's an example that I like to talk about is there's a group of students in some political science classes that like to make their voices the loudest voices in the room. They like to kind of take over classrooms with their ideas, and a lot of that scares a lot of other students off from speaking their voice and being able to talk. I spoke to one student the other day who told me that these students in the class did scare him from being able to talk about his views, and it was the political forum that gave him a place where he thought he could be part of a group. He could really talk about his ideas rather than saying, I'm a liberal, I'm a conservative, and this is what I stand for.
You're just joining us. We are talking with local students who are determined to have civil discussions in a politically charged election cycle. You can join our conversation on air at 904-549-2937. You can email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out and tag us on social media. And I want to ask you about that. Before we sat down, you were mentioning just the pressures that some students feel about being able to express themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And, the campus is a place where a lot of people are just learning their political identities or even learning about politics. Many people are just for the very first time in their lives kind of exploring this subject. And you would hope that that's happening in an environment where they're able to learn and speak and also make mistakes or, perhaps figure out what they're believing by talking it through. But you found that is hard sometimes.
Definitely. What you said about mistakes, I think, is really big. A lot of people don't want to talk in class because that's their professor giving them a grade. They don't want to mess up. Whereas I think, especially in the political forum, I make mistakes about certain pieces of information in the news, and I don't feel afraid of that because I have a community that will correct me and do it in a appropriate and nice manner. I think that's kind of the big thing. But with kind of the arguments in class, it is tough. It does make you nervous, and it makes you not want to think about politics anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all see that happening in the world.
Absolutely.
It sounds like that is very much displayed also in the classroom setting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And so how does it round out for, on the political divide? Do you feel that the school has any particular leanings in that way? Is it very much 50-50, kind of as we see in Florida and much of the nation?
I think if you were to look at the school on paper, it would definitely lead one way, and that has something to do with the voices that are being kind of hidden in the background. Not necessarily due to the college, but just afraid to, again, not get along with their classmate. Those are your peers, those are your friends. You don't want them to kind of get mad at you for what you believe in.
Mm-hmm.
So on paper, definitely, I think it looks a certain way, but I think there's a whole community of students that disagree with each other based on different political values and beliefs.
And do you feel that there's a kind of one side more than another that is silenced or feeling like they can't talk freely?
I do think the kind of conservative students at Flagler's campus do get a little lost in translation sometimes. Just because we are a very liberal school, we are a private school, it makes it kind of tough sometimes to speak out about going against what the majority does.
Right.
I do feel like that side is hidden, which is why we started the club.
Yeah.
So that
And so this group, I mean, it basically is a forum, obviously, for people to have these conversations, Manny, but are they directed conversations? I mean, I know you said you've got like the watch party, but are there topics that you're going to be picking and then asking people to study up on them and bring their questions and ideas? Or how are you going to manage those conversations?
A lot of the times we're pulling up articles and reading them together, maybe short ones, sometimes longer ones. Sometimes we ask people to come having read a specific article or just do their own research, just know of something that happened. And if you're interested in it or have questions, we can all kind of figure it out together. And I think that that's the whole point of what we're doing is if you have questions, maybe you're confused, maybe you don't know what you believe. This is a space with no labels where we can kind of figure it out together.
Hmm. And is it possible that some of these issues really don't have a political lens? I mean, so much of what we consume and see and hear discussed is viewed through a political lens. Even things like, science, medicine, things that typically weren't political. But are you able to divorce the topics that you're talking about from politics entirely?
I would say it's possible. I don't know that that's entirely our goal. I would say we definitely want to acknowledge that it could be political in nature. Maybe it doesn't have to be, but it could be. And if it is, our personal opinions about it, whether or not we agree or disagree, we can all kind of coexist with our different perspectives on a topic, whether it's political or not.
And so, what topics have been interesting to students?
Yesterday we talked about the election and we talked about swing states for a little bit. So that was really interesting to people kind of talking about why some states are swing states and what the difference is. And for some people that weren't very involved in politics, what a swing state is and things like that.
Yeah. And are your peers paying attention, Gabe? Are they voting? Do you know kind of what level of involvement, political involvement, most of the students have?
I couldn't give you a statistic on that, but I do think that a lot of students are more politically engaged this year than they have been in any previous election ever. And I would attribute that mostly to the accessibility of hearing about news media. We have social media, as we've mentioned. That is something that even people who aren't interested in politics, who aren't poli-sci majors, they're seeing it on their TikTok, they're seeing it on Instagram and YouTube constantly. And that's a lot of that sort of radical rhetoric that we see popping up on social media. I almost think that college classrooms are kind of like a microcosm for how social media and the voices that sound like the majority, even though they are the minority, the loudest voices get heard the most. So these radical voices are kind of turning students to think a certain way and think that radicalization is the norm. So even students in cinematic arts, students in environmental sciences, they're seeing this stuff on their feed every day. And it's certainly making people maybe more politically aware, more politically interested. Maybe it's turning them off from politics. But I think every discipline at Flagler, every student has some sort of stake in this election.
And do you think that your peers are generally savvy about sources of information? I mean, I know a lot of kids get their political information from TikTok. Do you think that they are aware of, how the algorithm works in terms of, perhaps rewarding certain kinds of engagement, or, perhaps that there's some sources that just aren't reliable but kind of appear to be? Do you think that kids are generally thinking along those lines, or do you feel like they're kind of susceptible to misinformation?
I think they're certainly susceptible to misinformation, and I think it's a big issue that we're facing right now because a lot of people I hear, because I watch social media too, but the way I do my research is I will listen to social media and then I will go look up articles from the left and the right on this topic, see what both sides have to say, listen to all the voices in the political sphere to make a general sort of opinion for myself. But what I see students doing is coming to class with the talking points that they heard on Charlie Kirk's show, or they come to class with the talking point that Kamala Harris used at her most recent town hall meeting. And that, in many ways, just is not productive if you don't know the nuance to many of these many of these issues in politics.
We're talking to local students who have formed a group that is apolitical but built on discussions of politics, and you are welcome to join our conversation. You can reach us at 904-549-2937, or you can reach out on social media. We have a message from Ed on Facebook. He says, other colleges in our area should be doing the same. It would be great to see our universities invite speakers from both the right and the left to see if the administration allows it, and who might be blocked from speaking by some of the more extremist members of the faculty and student body. Hannah, you had a comment that you were going to raise.
I was going to jump in on Gabe's point a little bit of just how easy it is for misinformation on TikTok. I mean, scrolling through something and hearing one little clip and then bringing it up the next day to somebody and not fact checking it. We hear about it all the time. And I'm guilty of it sometimes as well. I think that's something that we're trying to fight in our own sense of you heard about it on TikTok, now let's talk about it. Let's figure out if it's real or not.
Yeah. And drilling down on that can be hard, though. I mean, even kind of maybe even locating the video that you thought you saw and trying to track it down can be really difficult. And be like, I know I saw it on my feed, but who was it or when was it? And do you feel like those conversations in the context of your group, Manny, are um, able to unearth the truth, or do you feel like you're just sort of talking through the different sides? Like, do you feel like you come to any resolution as a group?
I would say it depends. I think that coming to a resolution is definitely possible, but I would say that we kind of want people to leave our group meetings with their own opinion, whether or not we're all on the same base. That definitely happens, and that's definitely a great thing. But I think one of the merits of the political forum is that we're kind of able to look at the facts all together if we're able to find them, especially with TikTok. It's so hard sometimes to find things, especially if they aren't real. But if we're all looking at the facts together, kind of shaping our own opinions from that.
So, how positive do you feel, Hannah, about you know this election cycle? What are you hearing in terms of concerns from your classmates, either about election day or the aftermath as the election is sorted out?
I know specifically in class, a lot of people are worried about having kind of what happened in the past, the whole January 6th of it all. I know that's definitely being talked about on campus, especially in the forum a little bit. I think just having America be divided is kind of the big issue, and it's definitely frustrating and kind of challenging for me personally. And I know Manny and I think the same way on that of what's going to happen if someone wins and someone doesn't, what's going to happen to America in general. And I mean, we get told all the time that we're the future, and well, it's do we want to go on a future that's divided? And I
Yeah.
know that's kind of the big concern, at least with college students, of is my choice really going to affect the next
One of the
20, 30
things,
years?
sorry, one of the things that we've been talking about a lot with people our age is doing our research about our candidates instead of just voting for a party, especially because for a lot of us, this is our first time voting at all. Maybe some people have voted in smaller elections, but at least for me personally, this is the first time I've had the opportunity to vote. So I think it's really important that like as a group, we're kind of talking about people and what they think and not what we think about the people or what we think about the party. Just these are our options, so let's evaluate them.
And do you feel anxiety about the election like a lot of people do? Do you feel anxiety about the future of politics in this country?
Yes and no. I would say I wouldn't don't know if I would call it anxiety. I think I have like reasonable concern maybe about what the outcome is, but I'm sure that whatever it is will work itself out. At least I hope so.
How about you, Gabe?
Well, I think that I think it's really, depending on whoever wins the election, whether it's Kamala or Donald Trump, we might see another Jan 6th. We might see the burning of cities like we have in the last few years. And regardless of who wins and what the outcome is, it's clear that the reason that we are so afraid of something like another Jan 6th happening is because the rhetoric of both the left and the right have painted their opposition as being threats to democracy, reincarnations of Hitler. And this is what has caused numerous assassination attempts against the former president. There's equal sort of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump and his constituents. So the fact that we're painting candidates as like literal evils to our country is what's going to cause an uprising, political upheaval after the election, regardless of who wins.
Do you anticipate that's going to happen regardless? I mean, is that your feeling?
I think there will be a incredible amount of unrest after either November 5th or it could be in January. I think it's inevitable.
All right, Hannah, what is your feeling about that?
I don't know exactly. I think no matter what, people are going to be upset, and as much as that has been the norm in the past 20 years. I don't think it should be that someone's going to win, someone's going to lose, and we have to accept it as a country. I don't think that's going to be what happens, unfortunately, with this election. And I think that has something to do, going back to Manny's point, of not necessarily the voting on party, but voting on who you think should represent the country.
What do you want to do with your political science major?
That's a great question. I have a law minor at the moment. I'm planning on going into law school, hopefully getting through that, becoming a lawyer someday.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's kind of the main thing at the moment.
So not necessarily an interest in politics per se.
Yes and no. I think this has set me up, and I've learned so much in college that I have that background to potentially do it. It's been my dream to go to law school, so that might be what happens. But it definitely, the college has given me the skills to go on later in life to potentially take a career in politics for sure.
Yeah, Manny, any interest on your part, any appetite for a political career?
I think it would depend. My goal is also to go to law school. That's the plan right now, especially getting so close to the end. But if that were to be what happens in the future, I would be very satisfied with that career, I think.
Well, Hannah, Manny, Gabriel, thanks all of you for coming up from Flagler College today to talk about this. We'll look forward to talking to you after the election as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Up next, a pilot program targets chronically unsheltered people with services and a place to live. Thank you so much. Welcome back. It's a local effort to solve homelessness with homes, and it begins by getting 25 chronically unhoused people a place to live. Here to tell us about this first of its kind local program is Cody Spencer, Programs Director for Ability Housing. Good morning. Brian Snow, President of Housing at the Sulzbacher Center. Good morning, Brian.
Hey, good morning.
And the City of Jacksonville's Director of Strategic Partnerships, Tracy Polson. Good morning, Tracy.
Good morning, Ann.
So, Tracy, this sounds intuitive, right? Solving homelessness through homes, but it hasn't been the route that the city has taken in the past. So, why is that? What's changing with this idea to find homes, put chronically homeless people in them?
Well, I think when Mayor Deegan was campaigning, the housing situation was very important to her, and it was a problem that she wanted to address, both in terms of creating more affordable housing and also looking at our unsheltered and unhoused population and how we could better serve them.
Yeah, and so there's unhoused people and there's chronic homelessness. Tell us a little bit about what you're targeting here.
Well, I think this was a really remarkable program. It's bipartisan, so it had support from then Council President Ron Salem as well as Mayor Deegan. And we looked to the experts, and we knew that Ability Housing had been running these kinds of programs before. They really understand, they have deep knowledge and experience in meeting people where they are and then working with them to get them both into housing, but with the supportive services that make this program really successful.
And Cody, as Tracy alluded to, I mean, while this is the city's first foray into this kind of approach, Ability Housing has been doing these experiments and pilot projects at least as far back as 2018.
Yes, correct. Ability really is really focused on serving our community's most vulnerable. While we provide housing for a range of individuals, we're really dedicated to serving those that are chronically homeless and have high acuity levels.
And so explain for people who may not understand, I mean, you have done, as I said, this research, there's data that you've collected in terms of how people who are chronically homeless respond when they are in a setting that is stable. And it has, I think, first of all, a lot of financial impacts.
It does. We had a pilot where we demonstrated that there's a 30% cost savings for the community for individuals to go into housing. Housing is super critical. When you look at Maslow's hierarchy, basic shelter is really the pinnacle for folks to get their stability.
Yeah. And Brian, what does it mean to be chronically homeless as opposed to just someone who's homeless?
Yeah. Chronically homeless is somebody that's been homeless a year or longer versus maybe just a few days of homelessness.
And those people are often facing additional challenges, maybe beyond just a recent eviction or being priced out of their apartment.
Yeah, correct. There's several challenges, and one, obviously, being unsheltered can potentially result in what we'd consider to be nuisance criminal offenses, and so it's as Cody mentioned, it's vital to us to get them off the street into housing. It's a cost savings to the community, and then also it's also we kind of look at housing as healthcare as well. So whenever somebody's in their own place, they're living healthier and getting more nutritious meals and et cetera. And so we deeply believe in this.
Yeah, I know that one of the cost analysis that you did, Cody, was about reduction in expenditures, but part of that is a reduction in costs to various agencies, emergency rooms, the criminal justice system, whether it's, arrests and bookings for these minor offenses that Brian was talking about, or jail stays, even if they're brief. There can be significant costs to a city because of it.
Correct. Providing someone the basic right to housing allows us to partner with agencies like Sulzbacher, who has a federally qualified healthcare center. So we're able to engage folks and get them a medical home for follow-up care, which reduces ER visits to our community. If folks have a quality place to reside and live, they're off the streets, so it reduces their interaction with the police. Overall, it really pulls people back home and gives them a home to come back to.
But Tracy, you're in charge of implementing the city's homelessness plan. And you say that, it was a priority of the Deegan administration to tackle some of the challenges of homelessness, but that took on some additional urgency this year with the passage of a new state law. So tell us, first of all, remind us what the state law requires of the city.
So HB 1365, which is an unfunded mandate. So the state did in fact pass this law, which prohibits public sleeping, public camping on public property. There are some other, aspects of it, but we had been working since the beginning of the year, convening a group of over 20 people, including Ability Housing and Sulzbacher and a lot of different providers, and we came up with a 5-year strategic plan. And then as we were working toward that plan, there were other things that were going on at the same time. We knew that this bill was going to be passed. We also knew that the City Council had created a homelessness and affordable housing committee, and then ultimately that committee recommended the Homelessness Initiatives Commission. So there actually has been a lot of sort of movement in this area that was also built on, the work of the Quality Life Committee. So it took on more urgency with this bill because effective October 1st, when it went into effect, they're looking to sort of see what different municipalities are doing all over the state. And then effective January 1, the city can be sued by private citizens, businesses, if it's not doing enough to address this. And so we pivoted and came up with a sort of 12 recommendations, this entire work group, that included some of the things that they're talking about here, increasing shelter beds, wraparound services, and a whole host of ideas that came out of this work group that we think will go a long way, if funded, toward getting Jacksonville to functional zero.
Do we know if the Florida law is unique in the country in terms of allowing businesses or neighbors adjacent to, say, a homeless encampment to sue the city? Is that or is that being done in other places as well?
I don't know if the piece about being sued is unique. I would probably say probably not. But I know that there are lots of states, and of course there was the Supreme Court case that went through, Johnson versus Grants Pass, that a lot of housing and homeless organizations were looking at.
And that was their decision that basically said you are allowed to remove somebody from a
Exactly.
public property if they're sleeping or camping there.
Correct.
Yeah. And so this public sleeping ban took effect on October 1st, Tracy, and it is now October 24th. So we're not quite a month in. What feedback are you getting about the first few weeks of implementation? How many people have been contacted? Do we know how successful the messaging has been from the people who are bringing this message to people on the streets?
Well, my understanding is that the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office has been informing people on the street about the new law, letting them know that this is no longer, it's no longer legal. The City Council passed a bill that would create a Jacksonville Fire and Rescue outreach team, and they're beginning to formulate. They'll begin training, and they'll begin to do outreach hopefully within the next month. I'm getting a lot of calls, and I will just give you an example. I have Al Ferraro, who works in our blight department, calls me frequently about folks that he sees. And he had been seeing this young mom with two young children, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and called me on Tuesday in the afternoon and said, I've got them. Is there any help we can give them? Like, can we find some place for them? And so I called a lot of people and said, we have this young mom and her two children who looked very dehydrated. I mean, think about the impact that this has on, everybody, but particularly children, the elderly, the heat in Florida, lack of, hydration and healthcare and all of that. And these children looked, like they were just spent. And we were fortunate that this mother agreed to go into shelter. We called City Rescue Mission, and they sent their van over. Unfortunately, she didn't stay. And that's something that I think happens a lot. And so, for me as a social worker, I'm really interested in understanding the stories of these folks, what it is they need, what prevents them from taking the help that is offered. And I think this is where supportive housing programs like Ability, like Sulzbacher, when they're really looking at what are the root causes and then providing those intensive wraparound services to get folks ready for housing and then to be able to stay in it.
I want to take a call from Marianne in East Arlington. Good morning, Marianne. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. I tuned in a little late, but I'm so glad that your guest there is a social worker because I have experience with homelessness, not personally, but my brother was homeless for several years due to his drug addiction. And, so no one in the family wanted to take him in because of, other issues that come along. But once he was able to get into Section 8 housing, and this is in Texas, he still struggles to pay his bills because he can't remember, or he thinks that he paid it and he didn't, or he double pays it, because he never learned about budgeting. And there's just so many things that a person who hasn't been, in a house and taking care of themselves and taking care of daily bills, they don't know how to do that once they get into housing. And so, I'm so glad to hear that with wraparound services that, people will be able to, they'll have someone there helping them to do that. And there's just so much more. That young mom, all I could think was when she's in City Rescue Mission, she's not allowed to do drugs there. I'm not saying that she did, but it's a possibility because my brother got kicked out of a shelter because he had drugs on him, and it's a huge issue. And I just hope that the residents will come behind this and be compassionate, because everybody has a story.
Marianne, thanks. And thanks for sharing your brother's story. Cody, about that, there are a lot of restrictions that are placed on people when they avail themselves of shelter. City Rescue Mission is one, but Sulzbacher certainly is another. If you go there, you have to abide by their rules. And if someone has an addiction, or even if they're a smoker, I mean, there's certain behavioral things that are not permitted. And so how do you accommodate that? I mean, you are dealing with a population that sometimes does have substance abuse issues. Does that preclude them from participating in housing opportunities?
So I think most of the providers in our community have adopted a housing first framework, which is there are no preconditions to either housing or shelter. I worked at Sulzbacher for a good portion of my career with folks who are coming in that are actively using or are struggling with substance misuse. There's certainly programs available, but we give everyone the opportunity to choose that. Forcing someone into treatment or forcing someone to make a decision never works. People have to choose it for themselves. So we just provide that support and encouragement. We also have a variety of harm reduction techniques that we try to employ. The previous caller talking about budgeting. Budgeting is one of the easiest way to do or to implement harm reduction because when you put out, on paper how much you're spending versus what you need to have saved, it really kind of illustrates where money's going. So progressively engaging people, making them more aware of how their decisions are impacting their life, and empowering them to make positive decisions is really impactful.
So just to drill down on that a little bit, though, there's 25 chronically homeless people that you're going to put into housing. Are they, if they have a substance abuse issue, are they required to address that?
They aren't. There are no conditions to our housing. no one's housing ready. We're not dealing with feral individuals. Like, these folks have experienced housing in the past. There are really no conditions. And when you set that expectation for folks, all they can really do is succeed. Our only interest is supporting that household and whatever it is that they want to do. Certainly, our goal is recovery and long-lasting support. And by providing community to folks, giving them the strength of weak ties, supportive neighbors, case management, people really kind of prosper.
I want to take a call from Carrie in downtown Jacksonville. Good morning, Carrie. Go ahead.
I've been interested in this issue for a long time. My office is right across the street from City Hall. Every day we see the chronically mentally ill as part of the unhoused population in downtown Jacksonville. It's caused merchants and restaurants to leave town. It's an issue for everyone downtown. And my comment is that we've really got to, and it's the state of Florida that has to do this, we have to have funding for mental health services, mandated mental health treatment, a case management program for the chronically mentally ill who are unhoused. I know that housing first is a great goal, but it's got to work. Like Judge Steve Liebman down in Miami has instituted a Baker Act civil commitment program with a sort of probationary mandated treatment component after the court to shut down the revolving door. I see it every day. I speak from a lot of knowledge about this. I'm a public defender. I see these people in court, and it's heartbreaking. And until we have a mandated mental health care, perhaps after this housing first, the problem is not going to be solved.
Thanks. And I should say that's Terry, not Carrie, but thanks for calling in. Brian, what about that? What movement is there on that front, if any?
Yeah. So as Cody mentioned, the key aspect to this is the supportive services piece. And so it's not just placing people into housing, but and we collaborate with Ability Housing on the case management aspect. And so if you just put people into housing and you do not provide case management and those supportive services, there's a great likelihood that they're going to fall out of housing and back to homelessness. And so it's vital, even to her point, that we do have those services in place, which we do. We have a weekly case management that addresses budgeting, making sure they're abiding by the terms of their lease. And as Cody mentioned, we have a federally health qualified center, and to get folks linked up into behavioral health care, primary care, optical care, and dental care to address all those needs. And so I can't emphasize enough it's not just getting folks off the street, which is extremely important, but it's also those intensive supportive services is what makes this what's going to be a successful program.
And Tracy, when are we going to get some numbers, do you think, about how the implementation of the new state law is going? Is the city going to be releasing some data about that after a month or two to kind of let us know how many contacts are being made, how many people are agreeing to go to shelter, how many people there's no shelter available for them, how many people are being jailed?
One of one of the important parts of our plan was focused on data. And we have the Homelessness Management Information System that Changing Homelessness, as the lead HUD agency, utilizes. And so the JFRD PATH team, for example, they will use that and be entering in, data into that system. We feel very strongly that data has to drive not only what we're doing in terms of efficacy and stewardship of taxpayer dollars, but we also need to know what's working and what's not working.
Well, it's a big initiative. I know that we'll be talking about it more in the coming months. But thank you so much for being here, Cody Spencer, Tracy Polson, Brian Snow. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, we talk to the mastermind behind the costumed bar crawl, Nightmare on Bay Street.
Medicine has been providing health care for the working uninsured for over 20 years. With over 200 dedicated medical volunteers, Volunteers in Medicine operates clinics in West Jacks and South San Marco. We're committed to a healthier community. More at vimjacks.org.
Voting is underway, not just for president, but on Florida amendments, local candidates, and more. Understand the issues with Jacksonville Today's unbiased voter guides at jaxtoday.org/vote.
Teach is a day-long conference created to engage, empower, and inspire teachers.
This is my 4th year teaching, and this is my first time at a Teach conference. And what I've gained from this day is the camaraderie when teachers come together and just share information and share experiences. But more importantly than that, we had a keynote speaker this morning who was dynamic, very inspiring.
Saturday, November 23rd. For tickets and more info, go to wjct.org/teach.
Donald Trump says if he's elected, he'll deport millions of people.
The Republican platform promises to launch the largest deportation operation in the history of our country.
Critics say the plan is inhumane.
What he's proposing strikes me as uniquely disproportionate, harsh, and probably illegal.
What is Trump's plan and what are the consequences? That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
Christian nationalism pushes for a fusion of American government and conservative Christianity that appeals to some in the MAGA movement. But other Christians are starting to speak out. They say this ideology isn't compatible with U.S. democracy and that it's a corrupted version of their faith. Next time on 1A, we meet the Christians pushing back against Christian nationalism.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. For those who don't find regular life scary enough, this Saturday brings the 3rd annual rendition of Nightmare on Bay Street. Here to tell us about the costumed bar crawl is the event's creator, Kenyana Holden. Good morning, Kenyana.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. It's nice to be here. So you are an event producer and a resident of downtown,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
an advocate for a vibrant downtown. How did this event start and how has it evolved over the last few years?
Oh, so it I just woke up one morning and I said, "What are we doing down here? There's nothing going on."
Specifically Halloween?
Just in general. So there we do have a lot that happens downtown. I'd say more so for adults, like 18 and up, and we have a lot of residents that are 18 to I would say maybe about 45 years old that are just walking around looking for things to do, and almost everything's shut down. If people don't know, after the business is shut for the week, the city, nothing happens unless there's a big event going on.
So you decided you wanted to kind of light a fire?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And so was the first event that you did the Nightmare on Bay Street, or had you done prior?
This is my first event with the city. I moved back from Orlando, and I had never done a festival or block party shutting off a street. I don't know what got into me, but it happened. Jacksonville Spark, right?
Yeah.
And it's just turned into what it is now, 3 years later.
So for people who don't know or haven't been, tell us about it. I mean, there's kind of a bar component. There's also a scary
Yes.
pop-up.
So I like to tell people, think of Halloween Horror Nights in Jacksonville. So I actually have scare actors that walk around with the mask, and there are scare zones. This is when we usually do it as a block. Again, obviously this year is a bar crawl. But we have multiple venues, and the whole point is just to bring life and more, I guess you could say, attention towards the downtown bars, because a lot of the times they are open, but there's not a lot of business there. They're not really marketing. They're doing their best marketing, but a lot of people aren't aware of them.
And so this is something that is like a unifying event. It kind of gets them all involved. So who's involved? Where does it start and stop? And how is it managed? Like, it's a crawl, but are people just kind of starting anywhere, or is it a patterned?
Yes, so I will say, to answer the first part of that, so it started with just Bay Street. I went over to the owners of Justice Pub, Live Bar, Myth and Element, and I said, "Hey, this is what I want to do. I'm Yana. Can I shut your street down? Let's be friends." And they were all for it. It was amazing. We did that the first 2 years. There is sound ordinance in Orlando. So I'm sorry, in Orlando, in Jacksonville. So once it hit that time frame, we spoke with JSO, and there was a little confusion. So I did have that as a learning experience. And what I decided to do this year was a bar crawl and see how it goes. So the same concept, just without the street component, to allow it to be extended beyond 11 o'clock. A lot of the residents wanted to have time to go throughout all the venues, and a lot of it took up until 2 a.m. So now we've gone from those three all the way up to the Elbow, which is right off of the Main Street Bridge, and it begins on the corner where Calford Chop House is.
So this runs basically from that area down to, I guess the jail's not included, right? In the
Absolutely not. We love everyone, but no.
Right. Yeah. And so, but there's the taco shop there, right? Ocean Street Tacos. You said Myth Nightclub.
Yes.
Live Bar.
We usually get food trucks. I'll say this, and again, the efforts is for the owners. So it starts at Spliff's Gastropub. Get food and stuff there, but you get your wristband at Ocean Street Tequila and Tacos. That's where the costume party and there's a haunted pop-up bar there. It's all Beetlejuice themed. It's really fun. So you get your wristbands and your tickets there, and with that band, you can get access to all of the participating venues for that entire night, including a silent disco. The headphones and everything are included.
And so does that include when they have are there some drinks that are along the way? You said everything's Beetlejuice themed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what does that look like?
It's really cool. It's fun. This is an interesting project for me because I'm used to doing more of like the gory stuff. It's Halloween. Beetlejuice is fun. So we spent about 4 hours just shooting content. I've been helping the bar owners like just be able to promote their brands and the skills of like their bartenders. It's been a lot of fun. So some of the drinks are like Lydia's Fatal Elixir. We have the Oogie Boogie shot, which is like a striped Beetlejuice shot. Some of it just has spider, some has gummy worms. So still fun, clean fun, but it fits the theme of it, and it's a lot of fun. It's all themed.
And the haunted house component, is that like you're at a bar and people are chasing you around with chainsaws, kind of like?
I don't have chainsaws this year. Everyone was freaked out last year. This year, we just have a lot of the iconic characters like the Maitlands from Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice himself, Lydia Deetz. We always have an original character for Nightmare on Bay Street, and that's just to kind of throw that Jackson spill into it. So we have Sweetie the Seamstress this year. So
and costume contests as well?
we do have costume contests on the inside of Ocean Street Tequila at 11 o'clock.
That sounds fun. And so
Mhm.
it's Saturday, October 26th. It starts at Ocean Street Tequila. This, I'm guessing, is an adults only type deal. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
bar crawl, right?
at least 18 years and older to get inside and enjoy the experience.
And how do people get tickets if they want?
They can get onto Eventbrite. We also have them available on Stuff to Do Jacksonville or unation.com as well.
Excellent. Well, Kenyana Holden, thanks so much for being here. Have a great party.
You too. Hope to see you guys there.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
That's our program. Thanks so much for listening. We welcome your feedback and suggestions. You can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. And if you missed anything, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight, or you can find our entire archive on your favorite podcast platform. I'll be out tomorrow, but my colleague Dan Scanlon will be holding forth with an A-team of local reporters to discuss the week's biggest headlines, from the Sapelo gangway collapse to a gubernatorial cease and desist. I'll see you again Monday. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9. Thank you so much.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Elder Source's T-Care program can help caregivers avoid burnout. Caregivers that assist Northeast Florida residents aged 60 or older may be eligible to get resources for themselves